Good morning, everyone. My name is Rose Yu. I'm assistant professor at Northeastern University. Today I'll be talking about fast and interpretable tensor methods for spatial temporal analysis. Let's look at a few examples. The first example is in the field of basketball play. Due to the advancement in tracking camera, nowadays we can record up to 2,000 events of approximately 1.5 million data points in a 90 minutes game. The question is, how can we learn from such kind of data and design better weighting strategies? The second example is in the field of neuroscience. Human brain have approximately 100 million neurons firing at a rate of 5 to 50 per second, resulting in large amount of brain activity data. The question is, how can we learn from such data and better understand our brain? The common traits of these two applications is that the data generated from those fields contain very rich spatial and temporal information. And the field of study of my lab is exactly on this point, which is called spatial temporal learning. The goal of spatial temporal learning is to make sense of large amount of data collected over space and time. It enables AI systems to understand and reason in space and time, and spatial temporal learning is critical to real-time decision-making in science and engineering problems. There are several technical challenges of spatial temporal learning. The first challenge is higher-order correlation. In this example, we have data from sensors attached to the robot. In order to learn the patterns of robot's movement, we not only need to learn the correlation of different variables such as motion, pressure, and etc., but also need to learn the correlation over space and time, which leads to higher order correlation. The second challenge is nonlinear dynamics. By nonlinear dynamics, I mean the dynamics in the data cannot be simply modeled with linear models. Nonlinear dynamics are also known to be sensitive to initial conditions and can be hard to simulate. The third challenge is high-dimensional structure. So we have different sensors recording data at different locations and time. By dimensionality, I mean the number of timestamps, the number of locations, as well as different variables. It is generally hard to compute with high-dimensional data. Tensor methods are uniquely equipped to handle spatial temporal data. Because tensor models are fundamentally higher-order models, so they can naturally encode higher-order dependency. Tensor models, in contrast to matrix models, are nonlinear by nature, so therefore they can capture nonlinear dynamics in spatial temporal data. Finally, there is a large family of tensor models that allows us to compute high-dimensional data and perform dimension reduction efficiently. In the following talk, I will demonstrate how to design tensor methods to learn from spatial temporal data in a fast and interpretable fashion. The first work I'm going to talk about is multi-resolution tensor learning. This is a joint work with Stefan from Salesforce Research and Yisung from Caltech. We study field goal prediction. Given the positions of the ball handler and the defenders, we want to predict the likelihood of field goal. On the left figure, the ball handler is the red dot, and the defenders are the green dots. In this work, we're mostly interested in learning the players' shooting profiles in the presence of defenders. Such profiles could be informative to coaches in designing playing strategies. Given the continuous valued position data, we first discretize data and put it into a one-hot encoding format. The right figure shows an example. Given the half court, we first discrete the court into a 9x9 grid, resulting in an 81-dimensional vector. For position data, in this case x, We find the position where it appears in one of the grid cells and assign the grid cell values to be 1 and the rest of the cells to be 0. We proposed a multilinear regression model to regress from positions of ball handlers and defenders to the field goals. In particular, given the discretized court, the positions of the ball handler is phi of x, and the positions of defenders is phi of x. The regression model assigns the tensor weights W to connect the positions to the field goal likelihood. So the variable y of A represents the player of A making a shot. Due to the size of the weight tensor is very large, we assume this weight tensor factorized into 3 factors. The factor A represents the player shooting profiles, and B represents the ball handler profiles, whereas the C factor represents the defender profiles. We can further decompose the factors into spatially dense profiles and spatially peaky profiles. In this case, we can separate spatially dense profiles with low-rank components, ABC, and spatially peaky profiles with sparse components, UVZ. Training high-dimensional tensor models are known to be computationally expensive. Furthermore, the space of non-tensor models is non-convex, leading to non-convex optimization objective, which can be sensitive to initialization. Finally, if we naively factorize the tensor W into factors ABC and use the factors to predict the field goal likelihood Y, the factors we learned from the data can be uninterpretable. In this case, shown in the right plot. In this work, we proposed multi-resolution learning, where we split the learning process into 2-step procedures. As shown in the figure at the bottom, we first initialize from a full-rank model, which we call pre-training. Pre-training used the factorized full-rank model as initializations for the low-rank model. The second step is fine-tuning, where we use SGD to fine-tune the low-rank model factors. In both pre-training and fine-tuning, we employed iterative fine-graining strategies, or multi-resolution learning, where we train a model at a coarse resolution first and iteratively increase the spatial resolution. We use multi-resolution learning to speed up the computation in both the pre-training and fine-tuning step. We provide theoretical analysis for our multi-resolution learning strategy. In particular, we assume the gradient-based algorithm is a contraction map, and the fine-graining criteria satisfied the second equation, which means the solution W at resolution D, T of D, and its difference from the previous resolution, WT of D minus 1, is smaller than a factor that is proportional to the grid size. Our theory built on the lemma from Nash 2000. The lemma states that for every resolution level, D0 to Dn, there exists a constant C1 and C2, such as the fixed point iteration, in our case SGD, with discretization D, has an estimation error that is bounded. In our case, we proposed a strategy that optimizes the tensor factors with SGD during both the pre-training and fine-tuning stage. We proposed a multi-resolution learning strategy to speed up the computation with respect to the contraction factor, alpha, and the terminal estimation error, epsilon. Our theory states that if the gradient descent operator has a contraction factor of alpha, our multi-resolution algorithm is faster than that of the fixed resolution algorithm by a factor of a logarithmic factor of 1 over 1 minus alpha times epsilon, with epsilon as the terminal estimation error. We also experimented with different fine-graining criteria. For loss convergence, we looked at the difference of training loss between time t and time t plus 1, which is a very straightforward fine-graining criteria. However, we also discovered that fine-graining is also related to the information contained in the data. So we accordingly proposed a set of fine-graining criteria based on the gradient statistics. In particular, we can compute for every grid cell a distribution of gradients of all the data points, G of W at data point I. If the distribution itself is flat, that means there's very little information that we can gain by continued training. Therefore, we want to split the grid, therefore fine graining, to introduce more diversity and more information in the distribution. We can measure the information using a quantity called entropy, which is the expected log probability of the gradient statistics. However, in practice, it's impossible to exactly compute the log probability of the gradients. Therefore, we use a histogram as an empirical approximation. We can also measure the mean and the variance, sigma and mu, of statistics of such gradient distribution. We evaluate our algorithm using millions of game frame data. The full resolution of our model is 50 by 40 of a number of grid cells. We look at the training loss over time in seconds, which shows the training speed. The left plot shows the training speed of pre-training stage, and the right plot shows the training speed of fine-tuning stage. We compared with the fixed resolution algorithm. We can see that the fine-grained algorithm, multi-resolution algorithm, which is the blue curve here, is much faster than the fixed resolution algorithm. This phenomenon holds for both the pre-training and fine-tuning stages. On top of that, we can also notice that using entropy-based statistics as fine-graining criteria, which is the green and purple curve here, it outperforms the loss convergence criteria, which is the red and orange curve here. For different criteria, we need to define a threshold value tau, and we also evaluated the sensitivity of our fine-graining criteria to the selection of value tau. In particular, we randomly sampled different stopping threshold values, and the left plot shows the loss over time for pre-training stage, whereas the right plot shows the loss over time for the fine-tuning stage. The plot compared different fine-graining criteria and their speed. As we can see here, the loss convergence curve, the green line, is slower than gradient-based statistics, which are the blue, red, orange, and purple line. On top of that, we also notice that gradient statistics outperform loss convergence in the short term for sigma-based threshold values, which is the purple line here. And for long term, the entropy-based thresholds, which is the orange line here, outperforms the loss convergence criteria. We also plot the learned profiles using our algorithm. Remember in the beginning of the talk, I showed some learned profile using naive training algorithms, which are not interpretable and look like random noise. However, using our strategy, we are able to learn factors that are much more interpretable. The left plot shows the learned profiles of defenders matrix C and the ball handler's matrix B. Each column represents a learned factor. As we can see on the plot, the profiles demonstrate vividly the behaviors of defenders around the ball handler and how they would influence the probability of a shot at the basket. The first two columns are the long distance shots, whereas the right two columns are the close distance shots. The right figure shows the effect of adding sparsity. So we separate out the spatially dense factors and spatially peaky factors. The right figure shows the spatially peaky factors. And again, the first row is the behavior of defenders, and the second row is the behavior of ball handlers. And we can see that the learned factors are much more peaky around certain areas on the basketball court. We also looked at the individual player profile, in our case the matrix A and matrix U. By investing the latent player profiles, we can compare whether certain players have consistent behavior. The figure on the bottom shows the individual player profiles of 10 different factors across 6 different players. We can see that player 1, 2, 3 have relatively consistent player behavior, whereas players 4, 5, 6 have inconsistent behaviors. We can observe similar phenomenon for the sparse version of matrix A, U, in a more spatially peaky fashion. In summary, we proposed a multi-resolution tensor learning algorithm with theoretical guarantees. We showed that our algorithm can achieve exponential speedup compared to the fixed resolution algorithm for learning high-dimensional tensors. In addition, it can help us learn more interpretable factors that are spatially coherent. In terms of future work, we're interested in exploring deeper understanding of gradient statistics-based criteria, which have shown to be superior to loss convergence-based criteria. Furthermore, we are also interested in investigating different tensor models such as Tucker models or CP models, tensor train models. We're also interested in looking at different optimizers such as ADAM or RMSProp. The second work I want to talk about is to learn tensor decomposition with Boolean factors. This is a joint work with my students Xuan Chang, Ian Yan from Snapchat Research, and Pradeep Ravikumar from CMU. We study brain activity discoveries using neuron activities with dense ECOG arrays. ECOG arrays is a type of invasive technology that have precise recordings of neural activities. We're interested in learning the latent features that can represent the brain activities, and the goal of this work is to discover patterns to understand consciousness within the complex brain network. There are several challenges when dealing with this problem. The first challenge is that due to the densely connected sensors on the ECOG array, we have high-dimensional spatial temporal data. Secondly, from the theory of consciousness in neuroscience, we know that the brain states are generally discrete, where traditional tensor decomposition methods can only produce continuous value factors, which are hard to interpret for the neuroscience application. We proposed a tensor latent feature model. Our tensor latent feature model assumes the data consists of real value features and binary codes. These latent features represent hidden patterns at each dimension, where the binary codes indicate the presence and absence of latent features. Generally speaking, given tensor data x of dimension n by n by n, we assume that this tensor factorized into our different models. This is the standard CP model. However, in contrast to standard CP model of tensor decomposition, the latent factor z's are assumed to be binary, whereas the latent factors u and w are continuous valued, representing latent features. This model is particularly suitable when we want to learn discrete state of brain activities. Before we dive into the details of our optimization algorithm, first I want to introduce the operator of tensor unfolding. Such operation unfolds a three-dimensional tensor of size R1 by R2, R3 into a matrix. This plot represents the mode 1 unfolding, where we unfold the tensor along the first dimension. The inverse operation is called tensor refold, which refold the tensor from a matrix. The optimization of learning tensor latent feature models is difficult, not only because the non-convexity of the tensor problems in general, but also because of the combinational constraints, the combinatorial constraints induced by the Boolean codes. We introduced a novel notion of atomic set, which allows us to reformulate the non-convex optimization problem into a sparsely constrained convex minimization problem. In particular, we want to learn a tensor W by minimizing the reconstruction loss of the data X and the learned tensor W, satisfies a set of constraints. The constraint states that the tensor W can be written as a linear weighted combination of a set of atoms, M, and the number of atoms is upper bounded by k bar. All the atoms M belong to a set A, which is the atomic set. The definition of atomic set is inspired by the fact that many signals can be expressed as linear combinations of a few building blocks, atoms. We can define the set AN as the set of rank 1 tensors at mode n. Each rank 1 tensor has Boolean factor z and continuous factor u and w. Our atomic set is the union set of all the modes, AN. In our case, the number of modes is 3. To solve the optimization problem, we proposed a generalization of the well-known sparse optimization algorithm matching pursuit, which we call binary matching pursuit. In particular, we assume our target tensor W is a linear combination of a set of atoms, and the weights are C1 to Ck. Given these atoms, each of those has Boolean factor Z1 and continuous value factor U1 outer product of W. We first compute the factors using a Boolean quadratic solver to guarantee the combinatorial constraints, which we have atoms M1 to M3. In the second step, we greedily pick the atom with maximum descent direction, say in this case M star, and we can adjust the weights Ck using least square and add this current atom to the existing solution from last iteration Wk, which gives us the solution at next iteration Wk minus plus 1. And we can repeat this procedure until the algorithm converges. We provide theoretical analysis for our algorithm. The key innovation in our algorithm is to solve for the Boolean factor z. And in this case, we borrowed the results from Nesterov in 2019, which states that there exists a semi-definite programming relaxations that has the constant factor approximation guarantees. This step is critical in our greedy step of finding the atom. The key ingredient in our proof is a 3 out of 5 constant approximation guarantee in the greedy step given by the SDP solver. We can prove the optimality of our solution using the binary matching pursuit algorithm. In particular, the theorem states that the optimal solution W star of the tensor latent feature problem can be guaranteed with respect to the Lipschitz constant of the target function beta, the convexity of the function gamma, and the number of atoms k bar. This theorem states that the number of atoms equals to the number of iterations in our algorithm, which shows a trade-off between accuracy and computation. By running the algorithm for approximately number of atom number steps, one can achieve an epsilon suboptimal loss relative to the optimal solution with k-bar number of atoms. We evaluated our algorithm on a large-scale ECOG data recorded from the lateral cortex in a macaque monkey during rest, anesthetic, and recovery conditions. The goal here is by looking at the ECOG data from the monkey and understand the brain consciousness. The data we obtained has about 108 channels over a 3 mm spatial resolution of 1000 Hz time series. And the Boolean factors indicate whether certain latent features or latent patterns appear at different spatial locations of the brain or temporal positions or trials. So we recast the time series into a three-dimensional tensor of time, location, and trials. We compared our algorithm BMP with a set of baselines that include latent feature model, which is a counterpart of our algorithm but designed for matrices, as a variant of LFM called LFM mix. We also compared with several standard tensor models, including like Tucker decomposition and CP decomposition. On top of that, we also compared our algorithm with recent results called Sustain, which is designed for computing tensors with Boolean factors. The plot shows the loss convergence RMSE over number of atoms for the 4 different mental states of rest, low anesthetic, and deep anesthetic, meaning the monkey is in a deep sleep, as well as the recovery states. The first row showed the denoising results, which means we add noise to the tensor and try to denoise the original tensor. The second row shows the completion results, which we randomly remove certain entries of the tensor and try to recover the missing entries. Denoising and completion are 2 standard tasks to evaluate tensor decomposition algorithms. As we can see here that our algorithm BMP demonstrates clear advantage in the loss convergence, especially when the number of atoms is very small, as shown in both plots. We also visualized the learned factors on a brain map. When certain regions are activated, we plot them in yellow. When certain regions are deactivated, we plot them in blue. And we can see that the model has learned some interesting patterns. The first atom, as shown in the first row, shows that the lower visual cortex, LV, is activated while the monkey is resting. The second row shows more interesting patterns. For example, the temporal cortex TC, the orange area on the left plot, is deactivated while resting. And we know that temporal cortex is mainly responsible for movements and touching. When a monkey is in a low anesthesia and recovery state, we can see similar patterns. However, when a monkey is in a deep anesthesia state, the lateral frontal cortex, LP, which is the blue region on the map here, and as well as the parietal cortex, PC, which is a yellow region on the plot, are both deactivated. And we know that LP is the executive region of the brain, whereas the parietal cortex is mostly in charge of sensory information processing. These patterns show that our algorithm is able to discover interpretable factors from spatial temporal data in an unsupervised fashion. In summary, we proposed a binary matching pursuit algorithm that solves the tensor decomposition problem with Boolean constraints. We provide theoretical analysis to guarantee sublinear convergence, and our model and algorithm can generate interpretable factors, as demonstrated in the application of brain-machine interaction. In terms of future work, we're interested in generalize our work to solve the Boolean tensor decomposition problem. In this case, all the factors in the tensors are binary, whereas in our case, only a few of the factors are binary. That's the end of the talk. Thank you very much. And if you have more questions, feel free to email me at roseyou@northeastern.edu.